So the title of our thing, which has been going about 5-6 weeks, is Thus Have I Heard. Subtitle, Great Buddhist Texts. So shortly after the Buddha's parinirvana, the Buddha's death, there was a great council in a city called Rajgir in India. And the purpose of that council was to gather together all the stories and the teachings of the Buddha, of his life and his teachings. And at that council, some were doing the telling and some were doing the listening. And those who were passing on the stories, passing on the teachings, made it clear that this wasn't their own teaching, and by starting with the words, "Thus have I heard." Okay? So very often the discourses in the Pali Canon start with those words, "Thus have I heard." And our last 3 talks have all been about the Buddha's teachings on mindfulness. So we've discovered that mindfulness is a very broad and rich area. It's not just about being in the present moment and knowing what your feet are doing. We've seen that mindfulness has a very strong ethical quality to it. So we become aware of ways we've acted in the past and how that has given rise to our current state. We reflect both on our unskillful actions as well as our generous actions and our ethical successes. And we develop this very vigilant, watchful state of mind that prevents us from falling into old, unskillful habits. And we look to the future. We look to the future by keeping our purpose firmly in mind. So yeah, mindfulness isn't just about what we're doing now, but also where we're going and how we're getting there. We saw last week that it also involves keeping the goal very firmly in mind, in particular, recollecting the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So if you haven't been here, that's what you missed. It's 3 hours in 2 minutes. And this week, in a way, we're moving on to something different, and in a way we aren't. So this week, we'll be looking at one of the Buddha's teachings on metta. So we teach the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana as separate meditations. But actually, metta is a special form of mindfulness. It's a way of being aware of the world. It's a way of seeing things. So metta involves being aware of others with kindness. So Sangha, the founder of Triratna, points out that the enlightenment of the Buddha was not a cold, detached awareness. The Buddha saw with warmth. The Buddha saw with feeling. So that's the area of tonight's talk. But first, a bit of context. So the most common image that we see of the Buddha is of him sitting in meditation. But actually, that's a bit of a misrepresentation, because most of the year, the majority of the Buddha's time, he was on the move, he was wandering. He was wandering from place to place, through established routes that went through the forest, joining village to village, town to town. He was described as the great Shramana, which means the great wanderer, the wanderer par excellence. And as he wandered, he wore a robe, which was stitched together from scraps which had been scavenged from rubbish heaps and cremation grounds. So he must have looked quite a sight. He usually slept rough at the edges of towns and villages. On one occasion, he said to someone that being a wanderer wasn't just about wearing a robe. He said, when you move from place to place and lose your sense of separateness, then you can truly call yourself a wanderer. So that's what the Buddha was doing, wandering from place to place and encountering people on the way. So during his 40 years of wandering around, the Buddha must have had thousands of encounters with people. Encounters with holy men from other traditions, encounters with random characters at the side of the road, and encounters with groups of his own followers who had sort of established themselves as practicing communities. And tonight we're going to look at 2 of these encounters with his own followers. So, one is in a place called Kasambi, and the second was in a place called Gosinga. And in the course of tonight, we're going to discover that even while the Buddha was alive and teaching, things didn't always go smoothly.
So, as Maitridasa says, the Buddha wandered for most of the year, but some communities of monks and nuns settled down into residential communities, either just for the rainy season or also others more permanently. And as people started living together more, a framework, a structure, a code of behaviour was developed in the Sangha that helped communal life run a bit more smoothly, a way of doing things that was called the Vinaya. And just, the way the things that were done. So, for instance, there are things that we do here. We leave our shoes outside the door. It's the way that we do things. So that developed, a whole code developed. So about 9 years after the Buddha was enlightened, he came to a place called Kosambi. And there was a bit of a hullabaloo going on in Kosambi. There was a bit of trouble going on. A whole community of monks, believe it or not, were in bad conflict with each other. And I'm going to tell the story of what led to it, but it's a bit of a convoluted one. It's a bit like one of those conversations that goes, well, then he said this, and then he said that, and then I said this, and then he said that, okay? So if you can't follow it, don't worry. But basically what happened was there were two main teachers in this community. One of them was a particular expert. His speciality was the code, the Vinaya, and the other, his speciality was teaching the Dharma, teaching the discourses. And the ethics, the one who taught the Vinaya, the one who taught the ethical code, he noticed that the Dharma teacher had left a bowl of water in the toilet that he shouldn't have left there. He should have thrown it away. So he checked it out with the Dharma teacher, and he said, "Did you know you shouldn't have left that bowl of water there? And don't you know it's an offence against our code of living to leave the water?" And the teacher said, "Oh, no, I didn't realise, actually, I didn't realise." And the ethics teacher said, "Oh, well, that's okay. You didn't realise, you haven't caused an offence to the code, you're fine." So the Dharma teacher went away and just thought, great, that's sorted, that's fine. But then he started hearing from their students, that wasn't quite so simple, actually. What had happened is the ethics teacher had gone to a few of his students and he'd said to them, "Do you know that Dharma teacher, he doesn't even know you shouldn't leave the bowl of water in the toilet. What's he like?" I don't know if he did say that. What is he like? And then the students went to the students of the Dharma teacher going, "Well, your teacher's a bit rubbish, So that, and then the Dharma teacher was like, "Whoa, what's going on here? Because I thought everything was fine." So he started telling his students stuff about the ethics teachers' students, and before you know it, you've got two factions all saying stuff about each other, and they're really in uproar. And basically, the way that it describes it in the sutta is they were engaged in disputes, arguments, and contention, and they wounded each other with verbal arrows. The sutta says, "They could not persuade each other, and they were not persuaded by each other. They could not convince each other, and they were not convinced by each other." So I don't know if that sounds familiar from any area of your life or the world. So it went on, and after a while, someone came to the Buddha and told the Buddha about what was going on. And the Buddha tried to intervene. The Buddha was really worried by this. The Buddha said, "There will be a schism in the Sangha." And he gave them a stern warning. He said, "Misguided men, this will lead to your harm and suffering for a long time." Because the Buddha was really bothered by disharmony in the Sangha. For him, the ideal follower was one who rejoices in harmony, is passionate about harmony, and harmony is his delight. The Buddha even gave a fantastic teaching, which actually we're going to talk about later on in the talk, but that didn't help. They just ignored him. He asked them 3 times to stop, and they carried on. He realised that they were causing themselves great harm involved in this fight, that they wouldn't give up, but the Buddha couldn't do anything about it at all. They were so caught up in the ill will, they couldn't let go of it. I certainly recognise that feeling. I'm so caught up in it that I just can't let it go. So the sutta says, "When many voices shout at once, nobody thinks of himself as a fool. Though the Sangha is being split, nobody thinks that they are the one at fault. They have forgotten thoughtful speech. They are obsessed by words alone. Uncurbed their mouths, they bawl at will, but none of them knows what is causing them to act like that. And it goes on to say, breakers of bones and murderers, cattle thieves, pillagers, when even these can act together, why can't you? It's quite strong, isn't it? But anyway, even with all this, in fact, what they said was, look, this is our stuff, Buddha, basically. Why don't you go and just go away for a bit? So they did. He just thought these men are obsessed. It's impossible to make them see. So he just got up and he left them to it. And actually, in the end, after a while, the monks did stop arguing. But it was only when the local villagers were so disgusted by the behaviour of the monks that they stopped giving them food. And so the Buddha had failed by appealing to the monks' highest sense, to their sense of wishing to cause, be part of harmony. But the local people achieved something by appealing to their stomachs, by depriving their stomachs. So in the end, actually, they did come back into harmony. So, as I said, the Buddha did give a wonderful teaching about how we can be in harmony before he left. And these are the 6 memorable qualities that lead to harmony, which I'm not going to tell you now. Yes, I am going to tell you. Okay.
Your thing is banging quite a lot.
Okay, thank you. I probably haven't got it attached according to the Vinaya. That's better. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So, there are 6 memorable qualities that conduce, the Buddha said, they conduce to reverence, unity, friendliness, and love for each other, whether in the Sangha or actually in all situations. So they are metta in body, metta in speech, metta in mind, shared ethics, shared vision, and a shared life. And we're going to explore that more in the talk. So, Maitridasa, actually, I'm a little bit worried about the way you've been tying your kesa. So I think you'll find that this is the correct way to so I don't know if anyone agrees with me. If anyone would like to...
Sure, but you taught me how to...
You with me, thank you. Well, I've got Sangha on my side.
Actually, I like the
Yeah, do you like to use with me?
Who thinks this is right?
I live, yes.
Who agrees that Satyajyoti has had enough to say now tonight?
I'm feeling a bit hungry. I haven't had my tea.
I do apologize. I didn't know it was an offence. So yeah, the Buddha did his best at Kosambi to help the monks to sort things out, but all to no avail. So he found himself once again on the road, wandering. And the first thing he did, understandably, was head for a piece of protected forest where he'd be on his own. And we get an idea of what he thought of the monks of Kosambi from a brief encounter he had in this forest. And this wasn't an encounter with a human being, it was an encounter with a male elephant, an enormous bull elephant. And in this encounter there seemed to be a mysterious empathy between the Buddha and this elephant. So the elephant had escaped for the afternoon from the demands of his herd. He was fed up of providing them with food, jostling for space as they went down into the pond to bathe, and the water was always muddied because... So this elephant had escaped the herd for some comfort and ease, for a bit of me time. It's true, I'm not making it up. So at the same time, the Buddha had left behind the quarrelling monks and nuns of Kosambi. And he thought to himself, I've been hemmed in by all these foolish people living in discomfort, not at ease. So he too was in need of some solitude. And then the Buddha and the elephant, they sort of met each other and they took each other in with the elephant gaze. And the Buddha realized that they were of one mind, one experience. He said, this unites mind with mind. Myself, the great elephant, and this elephant with its tusks as long as chariot poles, that each delights in being alone in the forest. A wonderful sort of moment of communion between the Buddha and this magnificent creature. So that was the Buddha's first response to being jostled around by his quarrelling followers. He needed to rediscover some ease, some solitude, some sense of peace. But interestingly, what he found was a profound solidarity with another living being. So shortly after that encounter, the Buddha carried on his way, and soon he came to the Gosinga wood. And in the Gosinga wood, there were 3 of his followers practicing his teachings. So approaching this wood after Kasambi, he must have wondered what lay in store for him, what they might be getting up to. This wood was full of salve trees. So salve trees are enormous trees with thin oval leaves and beautifully scented red flowers. And the wood was protected by a park keeper. So this was like a sort of protected paradise. And the park keeper, when he saw the Buddha, didn't know who the Buddha was. He said, "You can't enter this park. There are 3 men inside who are practicing hard and making good progress towards enlightenment. They must not be disturbed." Luckily for the Buddha, one of the 3 men inside the wood saw the Buddha, saw his teacher, and instructed the park keeper to let him in. So the Buddha entered that beautiful paradise. So these 3 men were called Anuruddha, Nandya, and Kimbila. But for reasons that we'll find out, they were all collectively known as Anuruddha. Anuruddha actually means in harmony. It's a clue. The Buddha's 3 disciples. So what happened next is they collectively and silently attended to their teacher. So one of them took his robe, one of them prepared a seat of grass for the Buddha, and one of them washed the Buddha's feet. And they did that in complete silence, just cooperating with each other. So after Kasambi, this display of courtesy and cooperation must have been a real relief to the Buddha. Okay, this is better. So the Buddha, well looked after and at ease, he asked the 3 men, "Are you 3 living in harmony?" Notice that this is the Buddha's first question. This is quite typical when the Buddha goes and sees his followers. That's his first question, "Are you living in harmony?" Notice that he didn't ask first, "Are you following the precepts?" Or "How is your Dharma knowledge these days?" Or "What level have you attained at the moment?" The uppermost on his mind, particularly at that time, was harmony. Because he knew from experience that harmony is the essential condition for spiritual progress, and that disharmony is undermining of all our efforts. So Anuruddha number 1, was able to report to the Buddha that they were indeed living in harmony. He said they lived appreciating each other's qualities and viewing each other through kindly eyes. Viewing each other through kindly eyes, or the eyes of affection. And because of that, they were fully harmonized, fully blended, like milk and water. The Buddha, understandably, was overjoyed to hear this. In fact, he was intrigued. He questioned them further. He said, "How on earth have you managed to stay in harmony like this?" And Anuruddha's reply was in 3 parts. So he said, firstly, they reflected often on gratitude. They reflected on what a blessing it was to live with such fine men. They reflected on how their lives were enriched through living with each other. And then the second thing was that they practiced metta at all times and in all situations. It's pretty impressive. In body, speech and mind, both openly and privately. So you probably recognise that as the first three of the 6 memorable qualities. And finally, they practiced self-surrender, the most challenging practice of all. So yeah, self-surrender, a willingness to let go of their individual preferences and to do what their companions would like, to do what would make their companions happy. A willingness to give up their unique individual wills and to live for the sake of a single mind of metta. So the result of all this collective practice was a profound state of interconnectedness between these 3 men. It's described as one-heartedness, ekachitta, one-heartedness. And Anuruddha said, we have 3 different bodies, but we are of one heart and mind. So yeah, out of their collective practice together is this mysterious and deep state of solidarity between them. So they were still distinct individuals, they were still unique with their own characteristics, their own qualities, but they'd become utterly intertwined as well through their collective practice. And the Buddha really rejoiced in this and encouraged them to keep going with this way of living. That was exactly how it should be. They'd really got it. And according to the story, all the beings living nearby, human beings, non-human beings, they also rejoiced in these 3 men. They said, what a great gain it is for us to be living nearby these 3 men, living in such a way. So that's a really useful set of guidelines, actually, for to live our lives by gratitude, metta, self-surrender. This is 3 that I come back to again and again, because my experience is, if I'm in touch with at least one of those, then my life seems more straightforward, actually less complicated. So yeah, reflecting regularly on the benefits that we've received from others, cultivating and practicing metta whenever we can, and letting go of holding so tightly to our own preferences and opinions, all the ways we impose our wills on different situations. So earlier this week, I had a phone call from a Sangha friend of mine who was in a bit of trouble and needed help. And so in that situation, well, this is a person that's really helped me and supported me in times of trouble, particularly in the last few months. So, you know, I felt a lot of gratitude to this person. And because of that, I really wanted to help. I really wanted to go out of my way to be kind to him, to support him, to protect him in some way. And there was an element of self-surrender in it, because I'd set that aside as a day off. I just sort of made myself comfortable, lying on my bed, setting up some sci-fi. And then the phone call came. So it wasn't undiluted gratitude, but there was enough gratitude and enough wish to respond that I was willing just to put aside what I'd planned to do and go and just spend some time with him. So that's a sort of very simple example of how gratitude and metta and self-surrender can sort of feed each other. So the final part of this story is that the Buddha was curious about what the fruits there had been for these 3 men of living that sort of life, living in harmony. So Anuruddha, number 1, described the progress that they'd all made in meditation. He described all the insights and breakthroughs that they'd had. And when they heard this, the other 2 were completely gobsmacked that Anuruddha knew what they had attained, because they'd never told them, because they were completely in silence. So that's a little sort of example of how they were completely tuned into each other, of one mind. So that's the story of the Anuruddhas. And it's a powerful story, it's a powerful symbol of the collective aspect of spiritual practice, the collective aspect of enlightenment. So yeah, spiritual practice is not just about being an individual, working hard on your own mind to free yourself from suffering. That's very important, but on its own, it's a limited approach, because there seems to be something at the very heart of the enlightenment experience, which involves profound communication, profound solidarity, profound selflessness. And if that aspect is absent, then enlightenment seems to be out of the question. So the Anuruddha is a really powerful reminder of that collective aspect of the enlightenment experience. Okay, so that's all very well for them, I hear you say. So they live in this protected paradise. They've got a park keeper. They don't have to work for a living. That's got nothing to do with the way that we live in modern conditions. So yeah, they were protected by a park keeper. So who's protecting my practice? They didn't have to work for a living because they were getting fed by the villagers, supported by the villagers. Who's supporting my practice? We don't have the luxury these days to just devote ourselves to practicing for others all the time. Who's going to look after me? And anyway, doesn't being part of a Sangha, being all sorts of friendly and harmonious, doesn't make that much difference in the scheme of things? Okay, so these are sorts of questions that can come up when we hear such as an ideal story. It's the pinnacle of how people could practice together. Well, I think those questions are really excellent questions that we need to keep asking ourselves again and again. Because behind those questions is a really skillful intention. So the skillful intention is, I do want to make progress, and I do want to make a difference. So if we keep having to ask those questions to remind ourselves of that, then that's a really good thing. And we ask the questions, we either need to convince ourselves that this is the life I really want to be living, or we need to convince ourselves that we should be doing something else. So, that sort of questioning is really, really important. We do actually live in much less conducive times these days. So it's vital that we encourage each other's practice. So we have Sheffield Buddhist Centre, we have the Sangha. It's vital that we support each other when we're doing well, and it's vital that we protect each other when we're wobbling, when we're in danger. If we don't do that for each other, then who will? Personally, I've benefited a lot from that in the last few years. If I do a good job, I usually hear about it, which is great. If I go through some sort of a crisis, I know that my friends are looking out for me. They're willing to relieve me from pressure if that's needed. They're willing to give me a break if that's needed. They're willing to protect me from danger if I'm in danger. So yeah, what a great gain to be part of a Sangha with friends like that. Yeah, supporting and protecting each other through our practice of metta that's what we need to be aiming to do whenever we're together. Viewing each other with kindly eyes. That's not just something we do because it's a good thing to do. It's actually part of the Buddhist vision. So yeah, what might that look like for us in practice? So yeah, practicing metta in body, physical acts of metta. So that might look like simple acts of kindness, like writing someone an encouraging note when they've made progress or they've done something really good. Could be responding to a request for help, either in person. You might see something on Facebook. It's that sort of willingness to respond. It could be being friendly to a newcomer at Baked Potato Club. It could be helping to dig up weeds with the gardening team every Monday.
Yes.
It could mean scrambling some toffee in our new cafe, which is opening at the end of the month. I hope. It could mean serving teas to the volunteers at the summer fair, which is on 25th of June. So, very sneaky announcements there. So yeah, physical, bodily acts of kindness. And then we are practicing metta in speech, verbal acts of metta. So there's plenty of opportunities to rejoice in people, either rejoicing to them personally or rejoicing about them to others, openly and privately. Metta in speech could mean taking the opportunity to apologise when it's necessary and being prepared to forgive and forgive and forgive again. It could involve just saying a kind word to someone who seems a bit out of sorts, who you're a bit worried about. Just going the extra inch to say something kind can make a really big difference. And then we have metta in mind, so mental acts of metta. So, of course, the main way that we can do this is by doing the metta bhavana. So wishing others well in our minds. We could do that both during meditation and just in the course of our everyday lives. And if we run into problems with the metta bhavana, which has been known, it's being prepared to ask for help and finding a way to engage with the practice. I always see doing the metta bhavana as a gift to others, actually. If we all have the intention to do the metta bhavana regularly, it will have extremely positive effects on all of us. But if we start to abandon the metta bhavana, that will also have collective effects for all of us. And finally, the last question, does it make any difference anyway? Well, personally, I think we can be confident that practicing metta amongst us in all these different ways, in body, speech and mind, both openly and privately, will have wider effects that ripple out. If I didn't think that, I definitely wouldn't be doing this. I'd be back in India with the orphans. But I do believe that this has effects. So yeah, Sangha members sort of leaving the centre, going out into the world, feeling supported, feeling protected, feeling strengthened, feeling encouraged, with more metta and more courage, which will help them to have a positive effect on people that they come into contact with. Newcomers who come to the centre that notice something different about this place, something attractive, something different from what they could find somewhere else. Something which might inspire them to make some really important changes which could benefit themselves and others. And then teams of people working together, living together, working really closely together, that communicates to people the possibility that life as we know it may not be all that there is to know. Life as we live it might not be all that there is to live.
So I just want to start with a little bit of metta in speech, which is I just really like to rejoice in Maitridasa and the joy it's been in writing this talk with him. So he really has been like one of those Aniruddhas. He has, it's just been, for instance, he sent me an email which said, all the flip charts are written, don't worry, here's what I've done. It was just really great to work with someone. I had a little bit of a wobble during the writing of it as well, and some things I thought, and he's just really kindly responded to that. So I'm just going to carry on and talk a little bit about shared ethics, shared vision, shared life. They're actually not in that order. I'm going to start with shared life. So if what the vision we have is of harmony, of us becoming more like the Aniruddhas and being able to live together, the more we share our lives, the more we're going to be able to do that. Because, of course, they were really sharing their life. They were living in the same, I imagine them living in the same hut. They were sharing their domestic life. You know, they talk about how one person saw that the bin needed emptying. They just emptied the bin. It was expressed in very small domestic details. And it's actually, we live in small domestic details, don't we? We live in the realities of life. And there's something about the more we share our lives, the more we can learn from each other, and the more we can really develop harmony, a real harmony as well. Because it's really easy to be harmonious with people that you don't know very well, that you just see every now and then, and you're on your best behaviour with. That's really easy. Real harmony comes when you live with people and when you work with people year after year, year after year, and you really come up against each other, but yet you go through that. Because harmony is not necessarily agreeing about everything. Harmony is finding ways to communicate even when you don't agree with each other. So it might be, for some of us, that means living in a community, or it means working in a Buddhist business, like the new cafe that's opening. But it doesn't have to mean that. If that's not how you live, it just means taking the opportunities you can to get together with other people who share your beliefs, your principles, what you believe in. And so things like coming to Sangha night, being involved in many of the things you said, actually. Maybe I shan't say the same list, but supporting the introductory courses, coming on the Sangha retreats that we run, attending the festivals like the festival we had on Sunday, volunteering around the centre, coming to the Sangha Sports Day, would be a good one. And because I think, you certainly get to know someone if they're playing, what was it, vegan against food. Yeah, okay. And also volunteering, making the scrambled tofu in the new cafe as well. So, yes, having a shared life. The more we actually share our lives, the more a real harmony will grow between us. Then sharing an ethical code. And in some ways, actually, sharing our life needs to be based on sharing an ethical code. So, of course, we have the 5 precepts. And for those who are ordained, 10 precepts. And the 5 precepts I find are really key because they are something I have in common with everybody who is practicing as a Buddhist. And it means that I can find language to talk about when things go difficult. I've got a shared language that I can refer to. And I know what other people's motivations are. So there's something about if I take it for granted that everybody in this room, everyone in the Sangha, is trying our best to practice the precepts, I've got a really good basis for harmony to arise. It doesn't matter whether I like that person or not, or whether we get on with each other, but because I know we share the same ethical practice, it's something very, very important we have in common with each other. And ethics is such a collective business because my experience is if I'm around people who are more ethical than me, my ethics rises, and the way I behave comes up towards them. And when I spend time with people who have a different level, a different standard of ethics from me, or no ethical principles, I suppose, I find myself behaving in a different way as well. When I didn't work full-time at the centre and I had another job as well, I would behave in a certain way in the morning in my other job, and then I would come up here and I'd think, oh. So it's quite interesting how being around people who practice ethics had quite an effect on me. So I think our shared ethics really contributes to a sense of harmony. And we have to really watch out for it actually as well, because the Buddha was very clear about the 10 precepts, the ethics that we follow. And sometimes they can get a bit distorted by kind of modern views, as it were, by ideas in politics or philosophy. And it's really important to keep a strong sense of to study the ethical principles and keep coming back to them. They're definitely not beginners' stuff. We teach them, of course, on the newcomers course, but ethics is such a key part of how we practice. And then our shared vision. And the Buddha said, actually, the shared vision underneath these other 5 memorable qualities is really key. And of course, he was talking about the shared vision that leads to enlightenment. So it's important that we all together do try and understand the Dharma as well as we can, that we really have a shared understanding of the Dharma. And the more we understand that, the greater harmony. I hope some of you will have had the experience of being in a study group, studying the Dharma, and that wonderful sense of harmony that can grow between you as all of you explore and enjoy the Dharma. And although I think it's interesting that Maitridasa said earlier about how the Buddha was enlightened, but the Buddha saw with kindly eyes. So actually, I think a shared vision is the vision of kindly eyes. It's being able to have the wisdom and the compassion so that we can look at each other with kindly eyes and want the best for each other. That is where harmony will really come from. So it's interesting that it is around this sutta that a very important teaching, a very challenging, important and teaching from the Dhammapada comes from, which is not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified in the world. They are pacified by love. This is the eternal law. Not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified in the world. They are pacified by love. This is the eternal law. So if we go back to those quarrelling monks, both of them thought they were in the right and the others were wrong. Both groups thought they had the right view and they weren't going to let that one go. They weren't going to let go of it. But the Buddha said to them, let go of being right, actually. Look at your mental states, that's the important thing. Really put into practice, can you meet somebody else's anger and hatred with love yourself? It doesn't mean being a doormat, it doesn't mean allowing bad things to happen in the world, but it does mean that we aren't approaching other people from an emotional state, from a mental state of anger, of hatred, of dislike, that we are working from a place, from kindly eyes, from a place of metta. And I ask myself, do I really, really believe that this is an eternal law? That actually hatred is only ever pacified by love? Because actually my natural response, if somebody comes to me really angry with me or criticising me or something like that, is not to respond with love. It's to get all armoured and to get right back in there and to start arguing back with them on their same level. And it's again and again I have to remind myself of the power of the actually, whenever there is a disagreement, whenever there are arguments or factions, the only way that ever gets sorted is if one person or one group of people are prepared to step back and step down and let go of being right. That is the only way it will ever move forward. But that can be very hard. I think it's something very exciting about the fact that we can do that and things that can change. So, another little rejoicing in Maitridasa actually is that in his role as chair, he has a particular flair, a particular attitude or knack of being able to act from this principle. So something will happen and somebody, I'll go to Maitridasa, this person, and I want to go back in with a whole load of shoulds and stuff like that. They shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do this. And Maitridasa is really, really skilled at just seeing that actually there might be two sides to the story, of asking questions, of listening to the people that I'm in disagreement with, and therefore letting go and allowing something new to arise so that so that instead of there being, I hope there isn't hatred, but instead of there being disagreement, there can actually be harmony. So I thought I'd just finish by reading from the Dhammapada. So just finishing by reading that section, which of course is right near the beginning, I think is such a key Buddhist text. Those who entertain such thoughts as he abused me, he beat me, he conquered me, he robbed me, will not still their hatred. Those who do not entertain such thoughts as he abused me, he beat me, he conquered me, he robbed me, will still their hatred. Not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified here in the world. They are pacified by love. This is the eternal law. Others do not realise that we are all heading for death. Those who do realise it will compose their